Buffalo Bills head coach Sean McDermott met with the media at the NFL Scouting Combine, giving us updates on the coaching staff and some clues about the direction of the team this offseason. I'm breaking it down for you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. I said on the first episode today that there's a good chance we'd have another one today and maybe even a few days this week where there are multiple episodes. Just a lot going on. The NFL Scouting Combine is here. We just heard from Sean McDermott at the NFL Scouting Combine giving some updates on the coaching staff, some of the big picture items for the team and the league, in addition to some comments on some players on the roster. And I want to share with you my top takeaways from listening to his press conference. Now, the big thing that I wanted to hear from Sean McDermott was updates on the coaching staff. And I was pretty surprised that ahead of him meeting with the media, we didn't get some type of official release of what the Bills 2025 coaching staff is going to be. You've seen that for a lot of other teams, and the Bills have had changes, and nothing was like officially announced by the team. And so Sean McDermott got up there and really confirmed a lot of the stuff that we've already known, but I guess has not really been made publicly known as official. But anyways, we got the updates that we were looking for out of Sean McDermott. Let's talk about that. And of course, the big one was confirming the dismissal of Matthew Smiley as the special teams coordinator. And Sean McDermott confirmed that, of course, called it a hard business. It's a hard part of the job. It's a hard decision. And he immediately said, look, I know what I said after the season, and of course that was that he's committed to Matthew Smiley for 2025 and has confidence that he's going to learn from the issues. And he said, look, he wanted to take his time, fully evaluate the situation, and then made the choice to move on. And of course, then hire Chris Tabor as the replacement. I've already done a full episode on Chris Tabor, so I'm not really going to break him down right now. But he did say, Sean McDermott did say on the hiring of Chris Tabor that, look, it's hard to come by a coach that has his level of experience. He's been tied up in other jobs, was available, interviewed him, liked him, and made the choice to hire him, and said he really valued the experience, and actually compared the hiring of Chris Tabor to the decision to hire Aaron Kromer to be the offensive line coach, where you're able to bring in a lot of experience into a position. And when I think about a lot of the coaches that Sean McDermott has hired throughout his tenure as the Bills head coach, there has been a lot of, guys that didn't have a ton of experience. Even Bobby Johnson, when he was the offensive line coach, or Chris Hall, very much not a super experienced guy who was the receivers coach at the time, or, Marcus West, the current defensive line coach. So it's interesting that he's certainly still done quite a bit of that, but he talked about some of the marquee jobs, one of those being, of course, a special teams coordinator and offensive line coach, and how he really valued the experience component that Chris Tabor adds to the mix. He also confirmed the hiring of Ryan Nielsen as a senior defensive assistant, and McDermott had a lot to say about Ryan Nielsen and talked about his pedigree with the defensive line, and said that will be his main focus in Buffalo is coaching the defensive line. Of course, Marcus West is still the defensive line coach, but obviously Ryan Nielsen's going to step in and have a big role here. And really reiterated his upbringing in New Orleans and the quality production that he's gotten out of the defensive lines throughout his career, and how that's an important part of improving the defensive line in Buffalo. And he got into some comments about the importance of the defensive line, which we'll talk about in a minute. But he said the thing that I can control is the coaching. That's what Sean McDermott can control. He can't. He's not the general manager. He doesn't pick the roster, but he does pick the coaching staff. He says my best way to emphasize and improve there is to increase our coaching. And of course, with Ryan Nielsen, who's set to be a senior defensive assistant, big time pedigree, is going to work with that defensive line. Also, Jason Reprovich coming in as the assistant defensive line. There's been some moves here from a coaching perspective that is definitely intended to unlock more out of that defensive line, which we all want more out of that defensive line. He also confirmed Mike Pellegrino as the new Nichols coach for the Buffalo Bills. Spent the last several years in New England as their cornerbacks coach. And of course, they fired that staff, Gerard Mayo's staff, and Mike Vrabel took over. And so Mike Vrabel actually took the Bills' Nichols coach, Scott Booker, who was with him in Tennessee, came over to the Bills for one season. He goes to New England to reunite with Mike Vrabel, and now the Bills take the same coach from the same position with the Patriots, and now he's in Buffalo. And he talked about his experience with Bill Belichick, how they shaped their coverage packages over the year. The player development in the secondary for New England has been very, very good. And that was what drew him to Mike Pellegrino to come over and be the Bills' new Nichols coach. He also said something pretty direct. He said, a lot of people are probably looking a little bit too much into the idea that we're going to play more man coverage. If that happens, he said it will evolve organically. But he even said, some of you guys are putting too much into that. And I felt very seen. So obviously Sean McDermott, listener of the podcast, I'm sure that's what that means. But of course, Sean's not going to say anything other than that, right? Like, even if that is at the forefront of their mind with where they want to go defensively is to play more man coverage, because all of the signs that clearly indicate that, of course, Sean McDermott's going to say, yeah, it's going to happen organically based on what our roster tells us we need to run defensively. McDermott also confirmed the firing of Eric Ciano, who was already hired as the Jacksonville Jaguars' new strength and conditioning coach. So it didn't take him long to find another opportunity. And he was very complimentary of Eric Ciano and his family. And he didn't have an answer as to who the replacement is. He said they're going through an interview process right now for a new strength and conditioning coach. So I wanted to hear from McDermott on the coaching staff, and that's what we got. And maybe there's some loose ends to tie up. Maybe there's some supporting roles that we'll find out about. But, the big missing piece now is who's going to be the strength and conditioning coach. And I'm curious who they bring in. He talked about the value of experience and how much that mattered to him. At special teams coordinator, you'd think that would potentially matter. At strength and conditioning, of course, they just said goodbye to somebody that had a ton of experience that was quickly hired up. So I'm very curious to see where that goes. He was asked about the Philadelphia Eagles winning the Super Bowl and the defensive line and, how important that is to improve, to beat the team that you want to beat in the Chiefs. And he said, look, it's a philosophical thing. And he said his philosophy has always been rooted in a great importance for pass rush. And he thinks the Bills need to try to continue to improve there. But then that's when he came in with that comment. He says, look, the coaching piece is what I can control. And it sounds like between Ryan Nielsen, Jason Reprovich, that he's done what he can to improve the unit. Now it's kind of on Brandon Beane to go get some players, right? This one was interesting. He was asked about the need for getting a field stretcher for the offense, right? A receiver that can win down the field. And he said he doesn't want to get too much into strategy, but he's a big believer in speed. He said it opens up a defense. He said stretching the field both horizontally and vertically are things I believe in. I thought we did that at times this year, but not enough. And then he said that the team would benefit from more speed. So definitely something to be mindful of. I wrote an article last week in the Herd Mentality Substack that profiled 3 free agent field stretchers that the Bills could explore. So if you'd like to see some commentary on that, go to the Herd Mentality Substack. There's a link in today's show notes. And actually, just before I hit record on this podcast, I put out another article that profiles 3 bargain bin free agent wide receivers that I think the Bills could be looking at. And so lots of analysis that you can find on some free agent targets. We're going to start writing about some defensive linemen here the rest of the week and corners as well. So a lot going through at the Herd Mentality Substack. There's a link in today's show notes to check that out. One thing that really surprised me from Sean McDermott was his comments on the Tush Push. It came out earlier in the day that a team had put a proposal out there to ban the Tush Push. And it came out that that team was the Green Bay Packers. And then Sean McDermott was asked about it, and he said, quote, "For me, there has always been an injury risk with that play. The health and safety of our players needs to be at the top. The techniques that are used with that play have been contrary to the health and safety of the players. The optics of it, I'm not in love with." Didn't expect him to say that, especially as one of two teams that are like big tush push teams. Of course, the Eagles being the other one. I didn't expect to hear that from Sean McDermott. I really didn't. And I'm fascinated to see not only if the league goes through with some type of a ban of the play, which I've never personally been a supporter of banning it. I think it's a good play. If it was that much of a cheat code that every team would do it, and you only have a couple that do it. So I'm surprised, especially, Sean McDermott said that, and he's a team that uses the tush push all the time. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. So I'm curious to see where that goes, not only, like I said, from a league perspective, but all right, if that's really what you believe, Sean, is your team going to do it next year? I guess we will find out. All right, so that was kind of the coaching staff, some of the big picture stuff. On the other side of it, Sean McDermott gave some very candid remarks about James Cook, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, Terrell Bernard, Cole Bishop, and more. We'll talk about that here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's talk about these player comments that Sean McDermott had. And the first one is about Josh Allen. Of course, he was asked, since the last time we spoke, your quarterback was named NFL MVP. And Sean McDermott went on a bit of a tangent about how it really validates everything that he's been doing for years in Buffalo. And of course, said that he deserves every bit of the award, which I'm guessing if you're listening to this podcast, you certainly agree with that. On James Cook, he was asked about James Cook and being pretty vocal through the media about his desire for a big contract. And Sean McDermott said, "I love James. It's a great example of one of the greatest joys of coaching is seeing a player develop like he has." And he said, "The business part will take care of itself." I've always believed that the Bills loved James Cook, and my personal thoughts on meeting his contract are not predictive, right? I can definitely see a world where the Bills are happy to pay James Cook a ton of money. I'd like to kind of see this year play out because I think the big sticking point is, all right, what type of back are you? Are you a 45% of the plays back, or are you a 75% of the plays back? Because the big time guys that get the big time bucks, they play 75%. All right, well, let's see it. Let's see it. I wouldn't do anything this year. I'd see it. Okay, you want your 15 per? Cool. Let's see if you can handle this role. And I'll be fascinated to find out. One thing that might have gotten swept under the rug that I'm glad Sean McDermott was asked about is Christian Benford, right? He had concussions in back-to-back weeks. That's never a good thing. Ravens game, and then, of course, early in the Chiefs game, he was concussed. And Sean McDermott did confirm that he cleared concussion protocol about a week after the AFC Championship game. Sean McDermott was asked about Keon Coleman, and not that he really said anything new about Keon Coleman, but he did say it a bit of a different way. He said, "I thought he had an up and down season. We're looking for him to learn from the moments of adversity." He used the word rocky to describe Keon Coleman's rookie season, and he just made it very clear that the team needs more from him. And he talked about, you don't know what you don't know about the league, right, until you're in it. And maybe sounds like Keon just the rookie year, a lot of demands with it, an injury, coming back from it. There's a lot for him to learn. And sounds like there's some pretty direct messaging, and he made it clear that there was some pretty direct messaging to Keon Coleman. So feels like there's been a little bit of a fire lit there. And a lot of career left for Keon Coleman, but certainly been put on notice here, right? It feels like a long time ago we were talking about jackets and cookies, right? It's been a minute since that stuff was at the forefront. Now we need this guy to play better. And his development's going to be important for this offense. And he needs to prove that the Bills are right about that investment and everything that goes into that investment, the trade back, and him being a meaningful piece of this offense. That needs to happen. On Dalton Kincaid, Sean McDermott said Dalton Kincaid is as serious about football and competing as anyone on our team. Part of the reason he's had some injuries is because he plays so hard at his size. The most important thing we need to do, and he needs to do, is get stronger to help with durability. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Obviously you can watch him play and realize, hey, not the biggest tight end, gets hung up on some contact. Like, it would benefit him to be stronger, right? I think anyone that's ever watched Dalton Kincaid, even back in his tape at Utah, you thought that. But it's an interesting layer to bring in a durability component to that. And, hey, this guy plays the way that he does with the stature that he does. Well, for that formula to work, he's got to get stronger. And so I think that's another loud and clear message. And hopefully we see some very, very good results with that for Dalton Kincaid, because I think very highly of the skill set that Dalton Kincaid has. I want to see him get it going with Josh Allen with more consistency. That chemistry is huge, but then also add that play strength that we've been talking about now for, feels like multiple years. Really fascinated to hear Sean McDermott talk about Terrell Bernard, because last week when I talked linebackers, I was pretty honest about Terrell Bernard and basically said, look, I don't really think he had the year that he was hoping for coming off of 2023, the big breakout year. And I thought it was very inconsistent. I thought he struggled as a downhill player. I thought the gap shooting and blitzing was not nearly as good. I gave some data on that. And then Sean McDermott kind of agreed with me. He said, look, he tried to do too much. He got the C on his chest, and he said, that's a big deal. Only 2 players got a C on their jersey. And this guy in his 3rd season, he got it. That's a big deal. And he said that, look, probably tried to do too much early in the season. And he said, look, at the midway, a little beyond the midway point of the season, he felt like he found his form a little bit. And a lot of the splash plays that everyone enjoyed in 23 started to show up. But, I thought it was comforting to me to have an acknowledgement that, hey, you know what? Terrell Bernard didn't necessarily have that great of a year. And I thought it was pretty obvious. I don't think anybody was talking about it. I brought it up last week, and I feel somewhat validated in me kind of saying that, like, hey, I think everybody appreciates him, leadership, young, got the C. Like, we like all that, but, you got to perform at a certain level. And I thought it was pretty clear that he didn't. And not that I'm happy that he didn't, but I feel somewhat validated in saying what I did last week about him with what Sean McDermott said during the press conference on Monday afternoon. So I'm very comfortable with Terrell Bernard as the starting middle linebacker for this team. But I think it's worth acknowledging that, for everybody that wants to get after Ed Oliver or whatever player you want to champion as a guy that didn't have the year you wanted him to have, all right, throw Terrell Bernard in the mix too. He deserves some of that. And I think that was validated. He was asked about Cole Bishop and, the prospects of Cole coming in and being a starter. And of course, he didn't say that was guaranteed, but said straight up, we are counting on him to have an impact on our defense, and said, look, he got behind last year, the injury during the spring and summer, that put him behind, and really went on a tangent about, what does he look like when he comes back? Does this look like a guy that spent the last several months, between the end of the year and the start of the OTAs, did this look like a guy that's been after it and can come in? He says, it's not hard to tell. He said, you see these guys that come in, it's not hard to tell what they've been doing for the last few months. And talked about Cole as a guy that needs to come in, ready to go, ready to come in and fly around and play fast and, see where he's at physically and mentally. And, it's interesting that he went down that road for Cole. I don't know that he's not a hard worker or anything like that, but that was definitely a choice. I've listened to Sean McDermott talk about a lot of players, and, it's interesting to see what tangents he picks to talk about him. And with Cole Bishop, he picked a route of, hey, what's this guy been doing? Has he been applying himself? Is he ready to run around like a madman? That's what he said. And so he said, it won't take long to find out what these guys have been up to. And, they're high on Cole Bishop, and obviously they don't have to earn everything, but it sounds like they really want him to hit the ground running this year, where last year it just didn't feel like he did. whether it was those injuries or like even listening to Cole throughout some of the OTA interviews and some of the questions that coaches and players were asked about him, it certainly felt like there was a big acclamation with just kind of onboarding and learning the defense. And, he didn't really hit the ground running. All right, need you to do that this year. And now you got some experience under your belt. You know what to expect. You're relied upon. Let's see it come together, because I think the team does want for Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp to be the safety tandem. And that needs to be a good safety tandem for this team. And it can be, but that starts with Cole Bishop, taking a big step year 1 to year 2. All right, folks, there you have it. Sean McDermott's comments, what I thought about him. Hope you enjoyed our conversation today. We'll get you another one tomorrow. Brandon Beane meets with the media at 2 p.m. At the Combine on Tuesday. So after that, I'll collect my thoughts and put together another podcast for you. Don't miss it. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.